Welcome to FieldCHED Connect, a higher education open educational resource application. FieldCHED Connect contains higher education materials which are useful for teaching, learning, and research purposes. It allows learners and educators to access content anytime, anywhere, free of charge. No registration needed. Just type in the keyword of the topic you wish to search. Click on the categories of the Philippine Standard Classification of Education and browse your way to its rich content. FieldCHED Connect is easy to use. Just key in your area of interest. The site offers different relevant and interesting materials to choose from. Scholarly prepared, accomplished, and uploaded by competent faculty members and contributors from various partner Philippine higher education institutions. Guided by the principles of open educational resources, these materials such as PDF, audio files, ebooks, presentations, videos, and many more are very beneficial. FieldCHED Connect. We educate as one.
The right to know is the right to live. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our 14th webinar entitled Freedom of Information and Data Privacy in Higher Education. This webinar is broadcasted live via HECBOL's Facebook page and YouTube channel. This activity is also made possible in partnership with the Ministry of Basic, Higher, and Technical Education in Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. This afternoon, a very credible and highly competent person will be imparting statutory laws and wisdom in the field of freedom of information and data privacy. I am Eden Stephanie Bolido, your moderator in this afternoon. To formally begin this program, please help me welcome the Director of the Commission on Higher Education and the Project Leader of Higher Education in the context of Bangsamoro Organic Law, Dr. Nelia A. Alibin.
Thank you, Eden. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone, most especially to the presidents, heads, faculty members, and students in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, my colleagues in the Commission on Higher Education, and our partners from the Ministry of Basic, Higher, and Technical Education, BARMM, school officials, and guests. It is my honor to welcome all of you to HECBOL Online. This is our 14th webinar entitled Freedom of Information and Data Privacy in Higher Education. This is still part of the CHED-HECBOL Project's capability building activities for the higher education institutions in the country, most especially to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or BARMM. This webinar will focus on relevant laws and policies on protecting the integrity and confidentiality of personal data and define the availability of information to stakeholders of higher education institutions. We thought of this topic when we see many FB postings displaying names and other personal information. We then realized that there is a need to understand the importance of protecting personal information while at the same time providing information to our stakeholders. Those are two sides of the spectrum, the exact opposite of each other. For today, we thank Atty. Kristian R. Ablan, the Assistant Secretary for Policy, Legislative Affairs, and Freedom of Information of the Presidential Communications Operation Office, and concurrently the Director of the FOI Project Management Office. He will be sharing with us his favorite topic, that is freedom of information. Once again, thank you, Atty. Chris, for accepting our invitation. So with that, let me express my gratitude on behalf of the Commission on Higher Education and of course the HECBOL Project. I express my sincere thanks to all the many individuals from CHED, the BARMM Ministry's Basic, Higher, and Technical Education, and to all our subscribers and followers. Let us continue to contribute to the success of higher education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Nelia, for that opening remarks. In our 13th webinar, our hearts are touched as a renowned Miss Salve shared her true-to-life experiences and financial advices. To set the mood in this 14th webinar, let us see the video introduction of our resource speaker.
Mabuhay and greetings from Malacanang, Manila. I am Kristian Ablan, an Assistant Secretary on Policy and Legislative Affairs in the Presidential Communications Operations Office or PCOO under the leadership of Secretary Martin Andanar. I'm also Concurrent Program Director of the Freedom of Information Project Management Office or FOI Philippines. I am a lawyer by profession, admitted to the Philippine Bar in 2006. I hold a management degree from the Ateneo de Manila University. My law degree is from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. I also have a master's degree on public policy from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. And I am currently finishing my master's in National Security Administration from the National Defense College of the Philippines. Prior to my appointment as an Asec, I also taught for 10 years at the Miriam College in Quezon City, the College of St. Benilde in Manila, and at Northwestern University in Lawag City, teaching business and taxation law.
There you have it. Thank you very much, Attorney Chris Ablan. And for this time, ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you our resource speaker, Attorney Kristian Ablan. Good afternoon, Attorney, and welcome to our 14th webinar.
Good afternoon, Eden. Thank you so much to CHED-HECBOL Project for inviting me over for your 14th webinar. So my deepest regards to Director Nelia Alibin, the project head of the HECBOL Project.
Okay, you may have the floor, sir. For the first part, we are going, yes po. We will be talking about the freedom of information. Then we followed by our live Q&A, and of course, the second part will be data privacy. Thank you very much, Attorney Chris.
All right. Thanks, Eden. Assalamualaikum. Maayong hapon. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. I'm very honored to be your speaker this afternoon to discuss freedom of information and data privacy. As in my introduction, it was clear that my background is really on freedom of information, and my expertise is in FOI, but I will be discussing data privacy. I beg for your indulgence if you end up knowing more about data privacy than myself, considering that data privacy is considered an exception to freedom of information. The way our discussion will be going for the next 2 hours is I will be discussing freedom of information first for around 40 minutes, and then we will have a open forum for around 15 to 20 minutes to answer your questions, and then afterwards we proceed with another 30 to 40 minute discussion on data privacy before we open again the floor for questions until we close the program. With that being said, I would like to begin my presentation. So, first things first, whenever any one of us or of you are asked what freedom of information is, the very first answer would probably be, Asec, FOI is about transparency. It's a tool to fight corruption. It's a way for us to find out how much our lawmakers, our government leaders are earning, how much are the projects, so that we can find out if the projects are real, and if they're not, then we can hold them accountable in the elections. While that is true, FOI is more than that. Next slide, please. FOI is not just for transparency, but it has many other uses that I think you in the higher education institution sector will be able to use properly. By the way, I am aware that attendees of this webinar do not only comprise of state universities and colleges, but also include private colleges and universities. Freedom of information is an executive order that mandates public offices, including SUCs, to disclose information. It does not include private institutions. So what use is my discussion for the next 30 minutes for you in the private sector? The use is one of the following: fighting fake news for academic research, innovation, and empowerment. Let me go through each of them one by one. First, FOI can be used to fight fake news. We know we live in the day and age of instant news, and it's so easy for anyone, even a 12-year-old, to recreate a government website or a news website and show a headline which can be shared millions, and it can turn out to be fake news. So freedom of information can be used to fight fake news, especially when the news is about government information. Right now, we are battling this COVID pandemic, and several fake news have been circulating since the start of the lockdown in March. Whether or not who has COVID, how much are we going to get in SAP, CAMP, TULAD, and other social amelioration projects. So many fake news are circulating. And if it involves government information, you can use FOI to fight fake news. Second, a third, FOI can be used for academic research. We know that most of you are actually conducting school online. No? You either use Schoology, Zoom, or any other platform in teaching, and it limits our students from going to our libraries or to your libraries to do some research. It even limits them from going to government offices when their thesis, dissertation, or any research paper involves government information. They can use FOI for academic research. For example, you are doing a study regarding poverty statistics. You can request that information from the Philippine Statistics Authority. Or perhaps you're doing a research on HIV in your region, in BARMM or in any other region of the Philippines. You can use FOI to ask the Department of Health for data sets regarding HIV rates per region, per province, per LGU level. That can be done. Perhaps you heard an announcement from the president or from your governor about an executive order or a new law that's signed that's not available in any government website. You can actually request that using freedom of information. Fourth, FOI can also be used for innovation. Many of you students are studying software development, and you could be the next Steve Jobs or the next developer. Did you know that the developer of Canva app is actually a Filipino-Australian? If you want to develop an app regarding tourism facilities around your region or around the country, you can actually request for geographical data or maps from our government agencies such as the Department of Environment, Natural Resources, and its agency, NAMRIA. You can also get a lot of data sets from the LTFRB and LTO, and perhaps make an application for iPhone and in Google to find the direction in anywhere you are in the Philippines. So FOI can be used for innovation. Finally, and most important, FOI can be used to empower citizens. Before, information is only available to those closest to power. And I know most of you in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in faraway Mindanao were not able to get information before that's only accessible by people in Imperial Manila, myself included. Sometimes it's not just physical location that counts, but it's also political connection. Sometimes kailangan malapit ka sa director, may kilala kang Asec, may kilala kang governor, congressman, para makuha lang yung impormasyon na hinihingi mo. Kailangan mayaman ka, kailangan maimpluwensya ka, kailangan lalaki ka, so on so forth. But FOI is a tool for the disadvantaged. FOI is the tool of the poor. Why? Because it is requester blind. Kay babae ka, kay lalaki, mayaman, mahirap, malakas, mahina, matanda, bata, pag humingi kayo ng impormasyon mula sa gobyerno, dahil may FOI, the government office is required to respond to you within 15 working days. The playing field is leveled by freedom of information. So it is an empowerment tool. I'll give you another example, scholarships. Minsan, kung sino lang po yung kakilala ng CHED sa CHED o may alam sa CHED, sila lang nakakaalam ng mga scholarships. But did you know that CHED has a long list of scholarships available for indigents and other worthy students? And you can actually use FOI to request for a list of scholarships available to you, maybe in agriculture, maybe in science and technology, maybe in law, maybe in the social sciences, what have you. But FOI is a tool for the poor and the disadvantaged, and to empower you to access information that may not have been available to you before. So I hope in the last 5 minutes, I was able to explain to you that FOI is more than transparency. It is for fighting fake news. It's for academic research. It's for innovation. And more importantly, it's for empowerment, especially for those of you in Mindanao, far, far away from the central office here in Manila. Next slide, please. I really beg for your indulgence to sit through for the next hour and 40 minutes. We have a long day ahead of us. Sana hindi po kayo makatulog. Please drink lots of coffee. I've read before that the best way to sustain the interest of your audience is to tell stories. And the next slides will show you different success stories of how FOI was able to improve the life of a Filipino citizen. The slide shows you that a citizen requested for information regarding hazard maps, and he requested it from the Office of Civil Defense. And the OCD disclosed the information to the citizen. So malalaman nyo na kung yung bahay ninyo, kung yung lupain ninyo ay nasa hazard zone. Malapit ba kayo sa tsunami area? Nasa fault line ba kayo? Madami bang soil erosion, prone to liquefaction ang inyong lugar? So you can get that information to make better decisions in life. No? We choose before we buy anything online, whether it's the next gadget, clothes, or whatever. We do our research. No? We look for suggestions and recommendations. Why can't we do that with government information? Before we move to another town, before we buy a new house, why don't you request for information from government, like this gentleman who requested hazard maps, and make better decisions in life? Next slide. If you are a student or planning to study, you can actually request for information from CHED. And CHED actually disclosed this information. Many youths wanted to find out, no? They wanted to move on from playing Dota and actually make a game application, and requested for information about higher education institutions that have game development courses, and CHED disclosed the information. So that's a success story. Next slide. If you are like me, who is a professional and want to find out how many of us exist in the Philippines, you can actually request for a list of number of registered professionals per profession: librarians, teachers, geothermal engineers, geographic engineers, so on and so forth. You can request that from the Professional Regulation Commission, or PRC. Next slide. And finally, if you want to use higher technology and are not sure with regulations, you can actually ask FOI. In this particular case, a businessman wanted to convert fertilizing his crops from manual to drone, and requested for the regulations from the Fertilizer and Pesticide Authority, and the FPA disclosed the information. Meron nga pong requirements para sa drone operations for commercial use. So there are many applications po for freedom of information, and I hope you're able to use it in your academic institution for research, fighting fake news, or also even to hold transparency and accountability. Next slide. Our default at the Presidential Communications Operations Office, which is supervising the FOI program in the executive branch, is disclosure. That is the general rule. The general rule is, if the information is kept by government, it is considered public information and should be disclosed to the public. But for our lawyers out there, we all know that for every general rule, there is a multitude of exceptions, and I will go to the exceptions later. But the general rule is openness. What is the wisdom behind disclosing government information? The wisdom behind that is because the information collected came from taxpayers' money. Pera nyo po, yung binayad nyo po na income tax, yung binayad nyo po na sales tax, yung VAT, yun po ang ginamit namin para makolekta yung impormasyon, magawa yung impormasyon. So may karapatan po kayo bilang mga taxpayers na makuha o makita o mabasa ang impormasyon na yun. That is the general rule. Like I mentioned, there are exceptions, and we will go to them later on. Next slide. Our policy is Executive Order Number 2, Series of 2016, signed by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, back in July 23, 2016. It is a 4-year-old policy which we believe we have been successfully implementing for the past 4 years. Next slide. The executive order reiterates the constitutional right of Filipino citizens to access information, official records, public records, and documents pertaining to official acts, transactions, or decisions, as well as to government research data used as basis for policy development. So reading the definition, reading the constitutional right, it covers almost all data that government has. Right now, based on our records, we have around 300,000 data available for review by Filipino citizens. Now, let's break down what access to information means. It covers official records, public records, and information. Now, let's be more granular. Next slide. Information does not only include written documents, but also expands to reports, letters, contracts, minutes of meetings, maps, books, photographs or pictures, data, research materials, film, sound and video recording, magnetic tapes, electronic data, computer stored data. So you can request for paper documents, you can request for CCTV footage, and you can also request for computer data or PDF, CSV file, Excel sheets, and what have you. So almost anything under the sun considered information may be requested from government, again, subject to exceptions. Next slide. Coverage of the freedom of information is the executive branch. And it includes our national government agencies like DepEd, the ICT, the SWD, PCOO, DPWH, its attached agencies like CHED, GOCCs like PhilHealth, SSS, GSIS, SUCs like Mindanao State University, University of the Philippines, and local water districts like Davao City Water District. So sa kabuuan po, mga higit kumulang 1,000 po ang government offices na sakop ng EO number 2. Next slide. It does encourage these agencies to comply. The judiciary or Supreme Court, our legislative branch or the Senate and the House of Representatives, our constitutional commissions such as COMELEC and Civil Service, and our local government units. Next slide. Our FOI program consists of 2 ways of asking. You can physically go to CHED in Davao City and request for statistics regarding game development courses available coming from HEIs. But if that's not possible because of lockdown, ECQ or GCQ, you can actually visit our website. It's www.foi.gov.ph, and we have around 487 government agencies, including CHED, that you may request from the comfort of your home, your barangay. You do not need to travel to Manila. You can already request it from that government agency straight from your computer. Next slide. What are the requirements to request for information? The requirements are very easy. All you have to present is a government-issued ID. We do not need any PNP clearance, NBI clearance, letter from your school. All you need to show is a government-issued ID. Why? Because FOI is a constitutional protected right of Filipino citizens. And the only way to find out if you're a Filipino citizen is if you show us a government-issued ID. Question, Asec, paano kung wala pa akong government-issued ID, student pa lang po ako, I'm 17, I'm 18. We, government offices have been instructed to accept student IDs. How much does it cost to request for information from government? Baka mahal. The act of requesting is free. Okay, I repeat, the act of requesting is free. So if you're requesting for electronic data, everything is free. You just give them a USB, and they will transfer to you your electronic data. But if you're requesting for paper documents, the government agency may impose reasonable fees for photocopying or printing. What is reasonable? It's anywhere between 1 pesos to 5 pesos on the average per page. Next slide. How long does it take? It takes 15 working days. So for students who are listening or watching right now, you might say, Asec, that's too long. 15 working days, that's almost 3 weeks. The project that Miss and Prof gave me is already due tomorrow. We understand we live now in the instant generation where everything is instant, but you have to understand that your requests have to go through evaluations and approvals. And so government has 15 working days. But I have good news. Next slide. Not this one. Next slide. The good news is on the average, government is able to respond within 7 working days. On the average, it means that there are agencies such as the Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA, also DBM, and Department of Finance that are able to respond to an FOI request sometimes within the day. So may mga agencies na mabilis mag-respond, may mga agencies na talagang sinasagad po yung 15 working days. Next slide. What is our process? So I'm now reaching out to our educators, administrators in HEIs or in SUCs in BARMM as well as in other parts of the country. Ito po yung ating process flow. A requesting party submits an FOI request to the government agency. It is received by an FOI receiving officer. The FOI receiving officer evaluates, make sure that the information is with the agency kasi baka mamaya wala sa kanila. For example, you're requesting for elementary school data from CHED. CHED does not supervise elementary schools. You have to go to DepEd. Or maybe the information you're requesting is about technical and vocational schools and you're requesting it from CHED. It's the TESDA that has that information. So from the get-go pa lang, the receiving officer will evaluate and make sure that the information is available in his or her agency. After the initial evaluation, the receiving officer submits it to his decision maker, the agency's decision maker, to approve or deny the request. If the request is approved, then they respond back to you and give you the document you are requesting. What happens if the information falls under the exceptions? Then they will deny the request and they will have to explain to you why the request was denied. They have to give an explanation. Hindi na pwede yung isasnabin ka o hindi ka papakialaman, yung i-ghost ka, isi-scene zone ka. They have to respond to you within 15 working days and to explain to you why they deny it if it's a denial. Next slide. Okay, so what happens if the request, for example, you requested for listing of game development courses for HEIs in Mindanao and that was denied by the CHED regional office? What can you do? What is your remedy? Your remedy is to appeal to the Central Appeals and Review Committee of the CHED. And you can appeal it within 15 calendar days. So we have an appeals mechanism. Next slide. What happens if during an appeal, it is determined by the mother office that the receiving officer or the decision maker did not disclose information that should have been disclosed? There are administrative liabilities. Ang first offense po ay reprimand. Ang second offense po ay suspension between 1 to 30 days. And if you do it 3 times po, you may be dismissed from the service po, following civil service rules. So may liabilities po tayo. Next slide. Okay, this slide shows you the information disclosure kingdom or the information disclosure community. And it consists of left side and the right side. On the left side is proactive disclosure and on the right side is reactive disclosure. You can check that out in journal articles na nabasa ko pa yan. So in proactive disclosure, you have programs such as the transparency seal of the DBM. So all government offices have a transparency seal in its website. That is an example of proactive disclosure. Government volunteering information to the public. Another example would be our shows, our webinars, when we volunteer information to you. That's an example of proactive disclosure. What else? For DILG, they have the full disclosure policy for local government units. They also have their DevLive application on Google Play Store. For DBM, there's also Project Dime for you to track big ticket infrastructure projects. And for DICT, there is the Open Data Portal wherein datasets are uploaded on data.gov.ph. All of these fall under the proactive disclosure umbrella. On the right side, we have reactive disclosure. That's where FOI comes in, because FOI is only used when a person requests for information from the government. And what is the use? No, nagtutulungan po ang proactive disclosure at saka ang reactive disclosure. Such that pag meron po tayong natanggap na mga request for information, natututo po tayo na yun pala yung impormasyon na hinihingi ng mga tao. And so next time, instead of waiting for them to ask, we will now proactively disclose the information. I'll give you an example po. During the time na office mate ko si Mocha Uson, kilala niyo po si Mocha Uson, ngayon po ay Overseas Workers Welfare Administration Deputy Administrator. Dati po siya, ka-office mate ko siya sa PCOO. And she was going on the presidential visits, and a citizen requested for our travels po, kaming mga officials, assistant secretaries and undersecretaries. And so sunod-sunod po yan. And it made us realize that citizens are conscious of where taxpayers' money are going. Kasi nga, pag pumupunta po kami ng Washington o pag pumupunta po kami ng Singapore, taxpayers' money ang gamit po namin. So may karapatan po kayo magtanong kung saan po namin ginagamit yung pera. Where am I going to? I'm going to from reactive disclosure, because PCOO realized that citizens are interested to find out where its officials are going. We already made a recommendation to Secretary to proactively disclose. So nagtutulungan po yan. It's like a loop. Reactive disclosure will be helping proactive disclosure, and proactive disclosure will help reactive disclosure. So that's just the information disclosure community for you. Next slide. Okay, now let's go to administrative matters. Lalong-lalo na po kayong mga SUCs sa BARMM. Based on my list, SUCs in BARMM include Mindanao State University, Adyong Memorial Polytechnic State College, Basilan State College, Sulu State College, and Tawi-Tawi Regional Agricultural College. Please po, mag-comply na po kayo. Meron po tayong FOI manuals na kailangan na isubmit sa opisina po namin. The slide shows you our compliance rate. We are 100% for NGA, so all national government agencies have submitted their FOI manuals. GOCCs po, 92%. SUCs po, 96%. So meron pang iilan po. Baka kasama po kayo doon. Please submit your FOI manual. If you do not have an FOI manual, we will assist you po. Just please send us a private message on our Facebook Messenger FOI Philippines. And local water districts is 46% compliance. Next slide. This is our website. Our website is like a Google for government. It is a public site, so any request for information made is publicly viewed by others. So you can actually type dun sa search bar COVID-19 assistance, and all requests for information from the past, lalabas po yan sa search results page. And you can actually click on them, and you actually don't need to ask anymore if the question you're asking has already been answered, because even the answer is also for public viewing. It's foi.gov.ph. We have close to 40,000 FOI requests already from 487 government agencies. Next slide. Agencies on board. This is the breakdown. We are 98% of NGAs, 83% of GOCCs, and 86% for SUCs, and 21% for local water districts. Wag nyo na pong intindihin yung mga local water districts. In denial po sila na part po sila ng government. Intindihan na lang po natin ang mga SUCs. Kung kasama po kayo dun sa 14% ng SUCs na hindi pa on board, mag-on-board na po kayo. Next slide po. This is a sample request page. So when, for example, you search for vacant slot for teachers in Cebu from the DepEd, this is what you will see. And it's like a messenger. It's like a Viber. It's like WhatsApp. Your question will be published. The answer will be published, and the information can also be downloaded not only by you but by everyone. Next slide. Ayan. So ito naman sa DepEd pa rin. Next slide. Okay. One of the reasons why I was ecstatic when I was invited by Director Nels is because of this slide. Almost half of our FOI requesters or our users come from the academe. These include teachers, administrators, researchers, and students. Kita nyo po, ang media comprises only of 3%. Kasi po, natatagalan po sila sa 15 working days. So they have other ways of getting the information. But by and large, our number one user are from the academe. And hopefully after this 14th webinar of the CHED-HECBOL Project, meron po kaming makitang jump in requests of information. Next slide. Okay, what types of documents have been requested? 42% request for legal documents and other government information. 39% request for statistics and datasets. 6% request for personal information. Ano tong mga personal information? This includes po ang personal data sheet, PDS, SALN, accomplishment report. And 13% are invalid. Next slide. What is our success rate? Our success rate is almost 50%. Out of every 10 FOI requests, 5 po doon ang successful, 4 po doon ang pending, and 15% are denied. 38% po are unsuccessful and 15% po ay pending. So we are hopeful that in the years to come, umakyat po yung 47% to somewhere between 70 to 80%. Next slide. This is another reason why I was very excited to address HEIs in Mindanao because of this slide. This is the breakdown of users of where they come from. 80% of our users in the website come from Luzon Island. Only 8% come from the Visayas and another 8% from Mindanao. We would like that 8% to climb to 20%. This data is as good as 2019. So hopefully ngayon 2020, umakyat po yung percentage ng Mindanao. Next slide. So what are the requirements? So for those of you SUCs that are gunning for your 2020 performance-based bonus, ito po ang mga requirements. Updated People's FOI Manual must be submitted by January 29, 2021. Yung mga FOI reports po, the same deadline. Don't forget to put the FOI logo, link to the e-FOI portal. And finally, submit to us a modified one-page FOI manual. For reference po, please visit our website foi.gov.ph/resources para mahanap niyo po ang FOI Memorandum Circular number 2 series of 2020. Next slide po. Okay, so we are in the exceptions list. I promised Ella that my discussion will only be 40 minutes. It looks like we are going over time because of the number of slides. I always underestimate the time. I told my colleagues Iris and Ella that 40 minutes is too long. Now 40 minutes is too short. We have exceptions. Next slide. These are the exceptions. There are 9. Okay, so if I'm not able to discuss all of the 9 because of lack of time, please schedule a one-on-one seminar with us and we will visit you on Zoom online to discuss them in detail. There are 9 exceptions. The 9 exceptions are executive privilege, national security, law enforcement, and protection of public and personal safety. Number 4 will be tackled by next hour's discussion kasi that's data privacy. Number 5 is confidential information by reason of official capacity. Number 6 is prejudicial premature disclosure. Number 7 is records of proceedings. Number 8 is confidential information under banking and finance laws. And number 9 are other exceptions not included between numbers 1 to 8. Next slide. I will briefly explain what each exception is. Executive privilege. Okay. In executive privilege, these include presidential conversations and deliberative process privilege po. For example, meron pong kaso tinatawag na Sereno versus NEDA CTRM. At ang ni-request pong information dito po ay ang minutes po ng NEDA Committee on Trade and Other Related Matters tungkol sa justification for increasing the taxes po for petroleum. Hindi po dinisclose ng NEDA kaya kinasuhan sila sa Supreme Court. Ang sabi ng Supreme Court, yung suggestion po o yung recommendation ng NEDA CTRM sa Office of the President falls under deliberative process privilege. Hindi pwedeng i-disclose yun kasi part yun ng decision-making ng Presidente at ng NEDA which is an extension of the President. So, hindi pwedeng i-disclose. Yan po ang tinatawag natin na information covered by executive privilege. Pasensya na po at dinaplisan ko lang po yung exception number 1. Next slide. Exception number 2 naman po ay national security, defense, or international relations. May isa po tayong kaso. Ang kaso po yan ay Lagman versus Medialdea. Sa Lagman versus Medialdea, question po ni Congressman Lagman yung proclamation po ni President Duterte tungkol sa martial law sa Mindanao nung nakaraan 2017 at hindi daw malinaw ano po ba ang factual basis for declaring martial law in Mindanao. At dinala po niya ang kaso sa Supreme Court at ang Supreme Court sabi niya, pasok po ito sa exception on national security. Hindi pwedeng i-disclose yung impormasyon because ang factual whereabouts of our soldiers and our tanks and our military in Mindanao may expose the lives of our soldiers in danger. So hindi pwedeng i-disclose. Yan po ang ating national security. Next slide. Meron din tayong law enforcement and protection of public and personal safety. Meron tayong tinatawag na HIV law. At sa HIV law na stricto po doon na hindi pwedeng i-disclose yung pangalan yung pasyente na may HIV. Maaari nyo pong hingin mula po sa Department of Health ang datos ng ilan po ang may HIV sa LGU namin. Ilan po sa probinsya, ilan po sa rehiyon, ilan po sa buong Pilipinas. Breakdown po, gender, break in age, that's fine. But you cannot request for the names because then if you release the names and their addresses, it would put their lives in danger. Kasi pag didirian po sila, baka mamaya papaalisin sila ng barangay o ng LGU. So yan po tinatawag natin na protection of public and personal safety. Next slide. Ito po will be tackled by this afternoon at 2 o'clock kasi this involves data privacy. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Confidential information by reason of official capacity. Nako, ang example ko po dito ay CHED. Ang mga regional offices ng CHED, gumagawa po yan ng mga investigative reports over HEIs. At yung mga reports na ito, pinapadala po yan sa central office, sa commission for their review. Maaari nyo po bang gamitin ang FOI para makuha yung contents ng report? Hindi. Because that report is considered confidential information by reason of official capacity. It is in CHED's official capacity in the regional office to make it confidential para po ang nakakabasa lang po ay ang central office. Yan po ang exception number 5. Next. Meron naman po tayong prejudicial premature disclosure. Sa anong term? Komplikado po yan. I will skip through that, but this involves GSIS, SSS, and other government finance institutions. I'm sorry, we don't have time anymore. It's 1:50. Next slide. Records of proceedings. So hindi po natin pwedeng ma-request yung mga records of proceedings unless kayo po yung data subject, kayo po yung nagrereklamo. Pero third parties cannot, no, because that's confidential. Next slide. Confidential information under banking and finance laws. You cannot use FOI to request how much Director Alibin has in her land bank account, no, because we still have our bank secrecy law, we have our Foreign Currency Deposit Act or FCDA, and we have the Anti-Money Laundering Act as well. Next slide. Other exceptions include lawyer-client privilege po. So if you want to read more about the exceptions, there is a memorandum from the Office of the Executive Secretary. It's also in our resources page, foi.gov.ph/resources. Next slide. Okay, so these are our latest FOI policies. Next slide. Naglabas po kami ng policy tungkol po sa redacting. And ibig sabihin po, pag ang hinihingi po ay kontrata and the contract has personal information, the action is not to deny the request, but to redact the personal information in the contract. Okay? The contract is a public document. Citizens have a right to review the document. But if it has personal information, confidential information, for example, the ID number, GSIS, driver's license number, signature, personal address, that can be redacted. That's what all our policy is saying. You can redact it by using a marker or corrective date or digitally redacting the sensitive personal information. Next slide. You can extract using a photocopier, a scanner, or actually retyping the documents and only showing what pertinent information should be disclosed to the public. Next slide. You will later see how FOI and data privacy actually complement with each other. Our policies do not bump, but actually help each other out. I'd like to end my discussion on freedom of information with stories, because that's how you keep the attention. I hope for the past 30 minutes, I was able to keep your attention. And here are the faces, many faces of Filipino citizens like you and like me who were able to request for information from government. The gentleman to the left was able to request for information from PCOO. The lady next to him actually requested for classification from the Department of Health regarding what hospitals are considered trauma centers disclosed by DOH. The gentleman next to her requested for information from the National Historical Commission of the Philippines regarding cultural heritage zones, and this was disclosed. And the lady over to the right requested for information from the Philippine Council for Women, the use po of gender and development budget of SUCs, and this was disclosed by PCW. So FOI works. It's not just for transparency, it's for a whole lot of other things. It's for to make better decisions, it's for innovation, it's to fight fake news, and it's also for academic research. Next slide. And empowerment. So we want sana to really develop the information officer of the 21st century to be knowledgeable not only for FOI, but also updated with records management, data privacy, and national security. We hope with my discussion for the past 40 minutes, we were able to impart knowledge on access to information. Next slide. Don't forget that FOI is just one of many tools that citizens can use to participate in governance. Meron po tayong tinatawag na DevLive, meron tayong tinatawag na 8888, meron din tayong Project Dime, meron tayong bottom-up budgeting under a new name, meron tayong open government, and meron tayong open data and freedom of information. So for those of you who would like to have some training, or please, if you can follow us, we're on Facebook at FOI Philippines, Twitter at FOI_PH, Instagram at FOI-PH. So please send us a message, like, and subscribe our social media pages. Daghang salamat po. Maraming salamat. This ends the first part of my webinar po this afternoon. Thank you so much. I am now ready to entertain your questions.
Thank you so much, Attorney Chris. Very well said. I really learned a lot also from this Freedom of Information presentation. Okay, so while waiting for our live question, sir, let us just acknowledge the pre-registered questions from the different institutions in the Philippines. Okay, Attorney Chris, let me start with from the question of Siti Aina P. Mala from MSU Marawi. So this is her question. How do we protect our intellectual property posted online? I think that's very relevant, especially for most students, most institutions and schools are having these online classes. So how will this intellectual right be protected?
Okay, first and foremost, that is in the realm of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, or IPO Phil. But since they're not here, I will take up the cudgels and answer for them. You have to claim your intellectual property right online. If it's a written work, you have to say that it is your copyright, no? And any use of your work should seek permission from the author. If what you have online are images, my suggestion is to put a watermark that you are the owner of such intellectual property. The sad thing about the internet is once it's published, it's there forever. No? So even if you claim copyright, it doesn't really stop a person from screen capping it or copy pasting it. And so the safety really is to claim the copyright. So sa umpisa pa lang, ng kung ano man yung produkto mo, nakalagay that the author exercises his copyright protected by the Intellectual Property Code. Any use should seek consent from the author, parang ganun. And that should be enough warning to others that if they do violate copyright, that you can go after them.
Yeah, so I think that's very clear and very well said, Attorney Chris. So that's for the viewpoint for the students and even for the teachers themselves. Okay, we go for the second pre-registered question. This is from Esperanza R. Sabangan from Makati Science High School. So this is her question, Attorney Chris. What are the common mistakes educators do to defy freedom of information in schools and universities? A very interesting question.
Okay, meron pala tayong participant mula sa Makati Science High School. Okay, this is a very difficult question to answer because you are asking us ano yung mga mistakes no in educators for defying FOI. Number one is they claim non-coverage. No, ang sasabihin nila ay hindi kami sakop ng FOI. If the teacher, educator belongs to a government education institution, covered po siya ng FOI. If the educator is belongs to a private education institution, hindi siya covered ng FOI. So, yun ang malinaw. Okay? And Makati Science High School is a government school. If it's not under DOST, it should be under DepEd. I think it's under DOST because it's a science school. It is under FOI. No? So, yan yung isang ginagamit nila. No? Sabihin nila, ay, hindi kami part, meron kaming academic freedom. No. Every government office, including science schools, as long as you are a government office covered by civil service, you are subject to EO number 2. Next. Another way that they defy FOI is by classifying all records as confidential information. Yung lahat na lang ba ng information, sorry, confidential yun. Hindi pwede, no? May mga impormasyon talaga na karapatan ng tao na makita, no? Katulad yung mga financial documents natin, mga budgetary documents natin, mga contracts. These are information that can be disclosed and people have a right to access to. Ano yung mga hindi pwedeng ma-disclose? Yung mga sinabi kong mga exceptions. Personal information. You cannot get the personal address, personal telephone number of a teacher o yung crush mong estudyante because that violates the Data Privacy Act. And I will discuss the Data Privacy Act later on. So those are the two answers to the question from the lady from Makati Science High School.
Okay, one last question, Attorney Chris, from our pre-registered, from pre-registration. So this is from Sir Gary, or yes, later for data privacy pala to. So next, let's have from Camiguin Polytechnic State College. So this is the question po. How can a faculty avoid problems among its students considering that there is online classes and sharing of information online? So in matters of state universities, particularly.
Okay. Yes, I know, no, because we all use these platforms. You have StreamYard, you have Zoom, you actually have Google Meet, you have Microsoft Teams, and all others. And I'm conscious that faculty are wary, no, that their intellectual property will be copied, no. Hindi katulad noon na they have to physically go to school. Ngayon, pag pinublish yun, they just have to record it on Zoom and then they have it already. Okay, the National Privacy Commission came out with guidelines po or tips, no, for educators to protect their intellectual property. And number one is to set your meetings in private by default. Kasi pag in public siya, lalong-lalo na pag naka-Facebook live siya, anyone really outside your class will be able to copy your work. Do not reveal your meeting IDs as well as their passwords in public domains. Kasi nga, pwede kang magkaroon ng lurker, hindi mo estudyante, tapos dahil naka-public yung password saka yung meeting ID, they were able to get in your class and then, you know, record everything. At least kasi pag estudyante mo, you can hold the student liable if shinare niya. Kasi sa umpisa pa lang, you can say na parang, okay, these slides, these PowerPoints are my intellectual property and not for sharing. And then you can hold them accountable if they share it. Pero once a stranger comes in, mahirap nang mahabol yung stranger. Next is make sure that the meeting host is notified when people join and everyone verifies the identity of each. So those are the tips coming from the IATF for COVID-19 as well as the National Privacy Commission, and the FOI office also recommends on how we can protect it from leaking to the public. Make sure that our online meetings are private and you know everyone who is joining the online class. Those are my tips.
Thank you very much, Attorney Chris. Let's cater, Attorney Paul, one live question from our Facebook, Sir Jean. Okay, thank you very much. So this is from Sir Jimmy De Vera Roldan. Can the privacy of an individual be invaded by FOI? So this is from Bulacan, CDSGA Bulacan.
Yes, thank you for the question, Jimmy. No, like I mentioned, freedom of information. Well, not I mentioned, but I'll give you an answer. No, freedom of information is broad. It includes all types of information that government has. When information is an individual's information, that is an exception. That is protected by the Data Privacy Act. So the FOI cannot sabotage a person's sensitive personal information. The only exception to that is if the individual is a public official. Like me, no. Some of my personal information I have already accepted that people can access, like how much I earn, what my salary grade is. You can actually download the COA. No, not COA. This is the. You can actually download the COA. What is this? Report on salaries and allowances received by officials. It's you can download it from the COA website. And that's just to emphasize that if you're a public officer, some of your personal information is accessible and it's a special case away from access to information. But if you are a private individual, your sensitive personal information as well as your personal information is protected by the Data Privacy Act of 2012. So I will explain that, Jimmy, later on in round part 2 of my discussion.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sir Jimmy, for that live question. And thank you so much, Attorney Chris, for emphasizing that freedom of information really entails or more on the for public officials. So moving on, let's do the second part of this webinar, which will focus on Data Privacy Act. So you may have the floor again, Attorney Chris.
Thank you, Eden. Okay, like I mentioned, guys, my forte is actually freedom of information. And but because Director Nels really convinced me na, sige na Asec, please discuss data privacy na rin. I will take up the cudgels for the National Privacy Commission, and I will attempt to explain data privacy to you. Again, if you end up knowing more about data privacy than me, please do not shoot the messenger and schedule a separate webinar with Chairman Raymond Liboro of the National Privacy Commission. Okay, that's over and done with. Let's start our discussion on data privacy. Next slide. These slides were based on the presentation of our colleagues from the National Privacy Commission. So this is fair use po, National Privacy Commission. So please don't go after me at the Intellectual Property Office. Okay, what is data privacy? Insofar as FOI is a constitutional right, data privacy is also in the Constitution. And it's in Article 2, Declaration of State Policies. It is the policy of the state to protect the fundamental right of privacy of communication while ensuring free flow of information to promote innovation and growth. So ayan, nakikita nyo po na binabalanse po ang access to information at privacy of information. At kaya naman pong balansehin. Next slide. Okay, under right to privacy, ano bang sakop niyan? The right to be alone. The individual's ability to control the flow of information concerning or describing him, which, however, must be overbalanced by legitimate public concerns, information to promote innovation and growth. Warning ko lang guys, no? These slides are text heavy. Don't worry, we will share these slides with Ms. Eden and Sir June and Director Nels so that everything that I'm not able to discuss, you can always refer later on. Just cite in the future where you got the information. Vis-a-vis, on the right side, you have free flow of information, you have the freedom of press, you have the freedom of expression, you have the right to information or freedom of information. So, ano rin yan? Nagtutulungan po yan, nagbabalanse po yan. Next slide. Ano po ang policy? Ang policy po natin ay Republic Act number 10173. I am not sure if my audience have already been briefed or trained by National Privacy Commission. I beg for your forgiveness if you already know these slides. Next slide. Ito po ang author ng Data Privacy Act of 2012, the late Senator Edgardo Angara, and he said, the Data Privacy Act makes it mandatory for all data collectors, whether public or private, to protect the security, integrity, and confidentiality of all personal information that they collect. By doing this, we help usher in a truly knowledge-driven economy. Next slide. Okay. Ano ang information privacy? The right to informational privacy is the right of an individual to control the collection of, access to, or the use of personal information about him or her that are under the control or custody of the government and private sector. It is essential to the protection of one's ability to develop ideas and personal relationships and underpins human dignity and other values like freedom of association and the freedom of speech. Napaka-importante ng discussion of information privacy, viewers and listeners, sa usapang higher education dahil ang dami pong personal information ang kinokolekta ng mga eskwelahan, no? When you apply to for admission in school, you actually fill up an application form and you're sharing almost all personal information, not only your address but your birth date, your blood type, if you have government issued ID numbers, name of your parents, name of your spouse, name of your children, and what have you. HEIs, SUCs have this responsibility to protect your information because you own it. You own your personal information. You have a right, and we will discuss what rights you have as a data subject. Next slide. The scope of the Data Privacy Act, it applies to the processing of all types of personal information and to any natural and juridical person involved in processing information in the Philippines. So it involves the schools that collect your data. It also involves the companies or organizations that the schools outsource the processing of your information. For example, ina-outsource yung HR or ina-outsource yung admin. Sila din, they are covered by Data Privacy Act. Hindi lang yung kumolekta, pero pati na rin yung nag-process ng information. So, as you can see, data privacy is really a separate and distinct and specialized practice on information vis-a-vis FOI, which is larger in scale, which talks about all types of information. Data privacy talks about personal information collected by not only state universities and colleges, but also private education institutions. Actually, it also includes hospitals, government offices, BPO, call centers, no? Next slide. Okay, meron tayong mga terminologies. Meron tayong tinatawag na personal information controller. Ito po ang meron din tayong personal information processor at meron din tayong data subject. Hold on. Next slide. What does processing mean? Processing refers to any operation or any set of operations performed upon personal information, including but not limited to collecting, recording, organizing the information, storing the information, revising it, retrieving it, consulting it, using, consolidating it, blocking it, erasing it, and destructing it. Anything like from birth to death of that information is considered processing of information. Next slide. All right, so this slide shows you again not shows you, but this shows you the difference between personal information and sensitive personal information. Personal information is any kind of information that can identify you. The easiest example would be your name. A name, you have a unique name, and so that's considered personal information. So any information, whether recorded in material form or not, from which the identity of an individual is apparent or can be reasonably and directly ascertained by the entity holding the information, would directly and certainly identify you as an individual. So aside from the name, it's also siguro a picture, your ID photo. That's personal information. Meron tayong carve out, ang tawag doon ay sensitive personal information. And there is a reason why the Data Privacy Act separated. Kasi the processing of personal information is different from the processing of sensitive personal information. You can disclose personal information. You aren't supposed to disclose sensitive personal information. And what is part of SPI? Race, ethnic origin, marital status, age, color, skin color, religious, philosophical, and political affiliations. These types of information is considered sensitive and should not be disclosed for whatever reason, no? Unless, may national interest, may emergency. Pero, for example, restaurants right now collect, marriage status and age. When you enter it, because there's an IATF resolution for contact tracing, that's actually unnecessary. No, it's not proportionate to the information that they need. And we'll discuss that later on. Pero may mga bagay-bagay na yun na pag sensitive personal information should not be disclosed at all. Health, no, kung may HIV ka, kung may COVID ka, education, genetic or sexual life of a person should not be disclosed. It's considered sensitive personal information. Next slide. Information issued by government agencies peculiar to an individual. SSS number, GSIS number, PhilHealth number. Yan yung mga hindi pwedeng ma-disclose ng mga personal information controller. So, the personal information controller can be the school, it can be an organization, it can be a person. Example dyan is yung mga dentista, mga doktor. Hindi naman sila corporation, they're private practitioners, but they're considered PICs. No? They're considered personal information collectors because pag pumasok ka ng clinic, you give your name. You fill up a sheet. And they now have the responsibility to protect the information that you gave them. Okay, meron din tayo tinatawag na privilege information. Information coming from between husband and wife, lawyer-client, doctor-patient, priest-patient. This can also should not be disclosed. It's protected information. Next slide. Okay, general data privacy principles. Ito paulit-ulit sinasabi ni Chairman, Commissioner Raymond Liboro ng National Privacy Commission. The collection of personal information should be legitimate to the purpose, for transparency, and for proportionality. Okay? Keep in mind, those administrators attending this afternoon, when you collect information, it's for a legitimate purpose. It's for transparency and it's for proportionality. Let's go through them one by one. Next slide. Ano po ba ang legitimate purpose? The processing of information shall be compatible and declared and specified purpose which must not be contrary to law, morals, or public policy. Okay? So, for example, schools, they collect that information about your parents because they can be your emergency contacts. In case something happens to you in school, the information they collected will be used to contact your next of kin or your parents. So that's a legitimate purpose. They can also collect health data, health information from you because what happens if you collapse, then they can inform the hospital. So it has to be for a legitimate purpose. Ano ba yung illegitimate purpose? Yung mangongolekta ka ng impormasyon kasi ilo-lurk mo siya, ifo-follow mo siya sa Facebook, that is an illegitimate purpose, no? So, yan lang. Next slide. Transparency. Ano nga ba ang transparency? Ayan. Ito, yung slide nakita nyo, this slide comes from National Privacy. I avail of fair use under the Intellectual Property Code. Okay, dito nakita nyo, pinablish ng Victoria Court yung mga nanalo ng kanilang pa-contest. So, being transparent, pero dinidisclose mo naman na yung mga taong yan, pumupunta ng Victoria Court. No? Hindi ko naman sinasabi kung ano nangyari sa Victoria Court, baka masarap yung pagkain doon. Pero syempre, inaano mo na, no? Na nawawala na po sila ng privacy nila. No? That's why they go there for their privacy and then dinidisclose mo yung pangalan. Nilagay mo pa sa billboard na nababasa ng bawat motorista. No? So the data subject must be aware of the following: the purpose and extent of the process, the risk and safeguards. Parang pag kinolekta mo yung information, kailangan yung data subject, pag finifill up niya, meron kang privacy notice dun. We are collecting your information because we will use it for so and so. Okay? And if you don't agree, then you don't I'm talking to the data subject, you don't fill that up kasi gagamitin niya yun eh. So yun. So you also have to identify who the PIC is and the rights of the data subject and how these can be exercised. Next slide. Proportionality. Yung pag mangolekta ka ng information, yung kailangan lang. O itong example, again, I avail of the fair use provision of the Intellectual Property Code. Galing pong National Privacy Commission to. Ito, para makautang, ang dami-daming kailangan. Picture, barangay clearance, cedula, medical, birth certificate, x-ray, police clearance. Alam naman natin, joke lang yan. Pero alam mo yun, pag nangongolekta ka ng information, yung mga kailangan mo lang na information. So for example, for example, the school is collecting information about your political affiliation, there's no need. No, there's a need for the name, there's a need for the age, there's a need for your address, your telephone number to contact you, but political affiliation may be information that is not proportionate to the legitimate purpose of the collection of the data. So take note of proportionality. The processing of information shall be adequate, relevant, suitable, necessary, and not excessive in relation to a declared and specified purpose. Nangongolekta yung pumasok ka ng restaurant at humingi sila ng let's say health data mo. For example, ano yung blood type mo? That's not proportionate anymore. Walang kinalaman ang blood type para sa contact tracing. No? So it has to be proportionate. The request for information has to be proportionate to the legitimate purpose of collecting the information. Next slide. Now let's discuss your rights as a data subject. So the slides of NPC skip and flip-flop between the obligations of a institution or a PIC and the rights of a data subject. So, organization and data subject, individual. Meron tayong tinatawag na you have the right to information, you have the right to access, and you have the right to object. We'll go through them one by one. Next slide. This one, right to object. Ano yung sabihin ng right to object? What information must be supplied? Description of the personal data, or hindi pa object, right to object. The purpose of processing, including direct marketing, profiling, or historical, statistical, and scientific purpose. So ito yung isang karapatan ng data subject. Malaman mo kung saan gagamitin yung impormasyon na hinihingi nila. Gagamitin ba ito para sa direct marketing? This isn't only on physical or brick or mortar. No? When you go to a school or when you go to a restaurant or a mall, when they collect these things. This happens when you go to a website. No? When you have to accept the privacy, nangongolekta sila ng cookies, di ba? That's information about you as a consumer. And you have a right to know saan nila gagamitin. Will they be selling your data to a third party for them to track you or call you or sell you or convince you to get this loan? You have a right to get the basis of their processing. Ano ba yung legal mandate nila? The scope and method of processing. Retention period. How long will they retain your information? Yun. So, our advice to HEIs and SUCs is to have a privacy notice everywhere. When you collect information, maglagay ka ng privacy notice sa baba para mabasa ng data subject. If it's a website, maglagay kayo ng button or tab where they can read the privacy notice. If you want, you can actually take a look at our privacy notice at foi.gov.ph. CHED.gov.ph also has a privacy notice, so you can also check yung words. More or less, they contain the same provisions. Next slide. When does the right to object apply? It applies when the processing is based on consent and processing is based on legitimate interest. So when they collect the information and you give their consent, you have the right to get the information on what are they going to do with the information that they collect. If the processing is for direct marketing, the PIC must stop processing upon the receipt of the data subject's objection. So, pwede kayong mag-object na, no, do not collect the data or do not use the data I'm giving you for direct marketing. And if you use it for direct marketing, I will go after you and find you liable under the Data Privacy Act of 2012. Meron tayong kulong. Hindi katulad ng FOI na admin liability. Sa Data Privacy Act po, hindi lang po admin liability, meron pong kulong at meron pong fines. And you will see that the fines are really exorbitant to dissuade people from disclosing personal information. Ganun po kahalaga ang personal information. Next, right to access. The data subject has a right to access, reasonable access, the following. Content of your personal data, sources of your personal data, the names and addresses of the recipients of your personal data, manner by which such data was processed, the reasons for disclosure, information on automated processes, ano yung process nila, date when the data was collected, and the name and address of the PIC. Again, the PIC is the organization or individual that collected your data at that point. Next slide. Your right to access includes your right to correct, right to erase, right to data portability, and the right to file a complaint. Again, it's text heavy. Next slide. Ano yung sabihin ng rights to correct or rectification? As my understanding is, so the FOI, I can discuss FOI for around 90 minutes, pero kinompress natin into 40 minutes. I think data privacy can also be discussed in 90 minutes, but we're trying to compress it within a 40-minute time. So this is just introduction. And if it piques your interest, you can actually reach out to the National Privacy Commission to conduct a more detailed discussion. Right to correct or rectification, if you requested for information at nakalagay doon na type AB ka, you can actually request that and then type A positive ka pala to change it. When does the right to apply? This is the right to erasure naman. Okay. When the personal data is incomplete, if it's outdated or false, used for unauthorized purpose, no longer necessary, the processing was unlawful, you can have it erased. Next slide. Right to data portability. Data portability is the transfer of data from one organization or one place to another. The right is to obtain from the PIC a copy of the personal data in electronic format that is commonly used and allows further use by the data subject. What are the conditions? The personal data requested concerns the data subject making the request. The personal data is processed electronically, and the processing is based on consent or contract. I mean, let's say, for example, you filled in a biodata page, and you can request for that information so that you can copy an electronic file and use it in your next employer. Next, the right to file a complaint. So what happens if your information is misused? You can file a complaint. No? The data subject shall be indemnified for any damages sustained due to inaccurate, incomplete, outdated, false, unlawful, obtained, or unauthorized use of personal data, take into account any violation of his or her rights. Pag ninakaw po yung data ninyo, bakit po mahalaga ang personal information? Dahil pwede pong gamitin yan sa identity theft. Kukolektahin po yung pangalan nyo. Kukunin po yung ID picture nyo. Kukunin po yung GSIS TIN number nyo, and then they will pretend that you are you, and they will may nangyari na po kasi may mga kaso na nag-open sila ng bank account, nag-open sila ng credit card na hindi mo alam. May naging kaso na po to. I don't know if you've seen it in recent years, but a teacher's personal information was actually misused, no? And it was used to create a credit card, and wala, yung gumamit nun, bili ng bili, and then next thing you know, andun na yung police sa labas ng bahay ng teacher, tapos kinakasuhan na siya ng theft, estafa, and yun pala, ginamit kasing information na nakuha tungkol sa kanya, no? So ang daming pwedeng mangyari. Pwede pa mag-catfishing, no? Mag-pretend na ikaw yung taong yun, lalo na kung gwapo ka or maganda ka tapos mangliligaw ka. Anyway, that's another matter. Next slide. Critical lawful processing of personal information. The data subject must have given consent prior to the collection. So kailangan meron kayong pinipirmahan na consent form sa dulo na you are allowing the organization to collect the data. Number 2, the processing involves the personal information of the data subject who is party to a contractual agreement or in order to fulfill obligations under the contract. The processing necessary for compliance is necessary with legal obligation to which the PIC is subject. Okay. Ang example po niyan, processing is necessary for compliance with the legal obligation is BIR audit, no? Required sila na i-process yun kasi nga meron batas na kailangan nilang i-disclose sa BIR yung informasyon na kinolekta nila. Next slide. Processing necessary to protect vitally important interests of the data subject including his or her life and health. Dito po pumapasok yung information related po to contact tracing. It's 4 and 5 are related. Processing necessary to respond to national emergency kasi nga we are under a public health emergency as declared by the Secretary of Health and concurred po by the Privacy Commissioner. The information collected in response to this national emergency is a lawful processing of your personal information. Meron din po tayong processing necessary for the fulfillment of a constitutional or statutory mandate of a public authority. Yun nga, yung requirement ng civil service under civil service laws na mangolekta ng information. Ano po yan? Lawful processing of information. And necessary to pursue the legitimate interest of the PIC or by third party or parties to whom data is disclosed. Legitimate interest, ito po, yung pag-publish ng mga listahan ng SAP beneficiaries. Lawful processing po yun kasi ano po yan, ang legitimate interest dyan is yung interest na malaman ng taong bayan na ang pera ng bayan ay nagagamit po sa mabuti at hindi po hindi po nawawala sa korupsyon. Kasi hindi natin alam. For example, pag di mo nilista kung sino yung nakatanggap, di malay ba natin na binulsa lang pala yun ng LGU? So, kaya meron tayong tinatawag na ililista mo yung mga beneficiaries kasi yun yung proof mo na may nakatanggap ng ayuda, ng SAP, ng TUPAD, ng CAMP, kung ano man yan. Pero mamaya pag-usapan po natin ang SAP, pag-usapan din natin ang pag ikaw naman ang may COVID. Pag SAP yung pinag-usapan, pag beneficiaries ang pinag-uusapan, ang legitimate interest dyan ay funds, public funds. Kaya pwedeng ilista. Pero hanggang pangalan lang. Hindi mo na pwedeng ilagay yung personal address, personal telephone number ng mga nakatanggap. Pangalan lang. Pagpunta naman tayo sa isang may COVID, ang pinoprotekta naman natin sa kanya is yung personal information niya, yung privacy niya. Yung right to privacy niya at hindi pwedeng ma-disclose yung pangalan niya. Ang pwede lang i-disclose para sa contact tracing would be yung mga descriptive data. Saan siya pumunta, sino-sino yung mga nakasama niya para at least pag nabasa mo yun, pwede mong sabihin, andun ako nung araw na yun. Pero hindi mo pwedeng malaman yung pangalan niya. So, magkaiba po yun. Yung mga sub-beneficiaries, ibang rason po yun. Pagdating naman sa pagiging COVID patient mo o COVID positive ka, protected ka naman ng right to privacy mo and personal information under the Data Privacy Act. So, let's just make sure that we know the difference po. Next slide. Ganun din po ang processing of sensitive personal and privileged information. Mas mataas po ang threshold o ang requirement po na i-protect ng PIC ang pagdating sa sensitive personal information. Medyo madami-dami pa po ang slides natin. So, pakibasa na lang po yan after this seminar. Next slide. Yan. Okay. Ang special cases na slide, yan naman po ang exception sa data privacy. At makikita nyo po na ano po siya, complementary sa freedom of information. Tulad ng number 1, hindi po kasama sa protection ng data privacy ang information about an individual who is an officer or employee of a government institution. And the information relates to his position and function. Magkano po yung sweldo ko? Ano po yung salary grade ko? Ano yung terms of reference ko? May karapatan po kayo dyan. Number 2, information, ano yung work experience ko? For example, yung posisyon na ino-occupy ko requires a master's degree. May karapatan kayo malaman kung may master's degree nga ako, baka mamaya usurper ako, hindi pala ako dapat umupo dyan. Diba? Ang requirement dun is dapat may 4 years of managerial or supervisory experience, tapos wala pala ako, may karapatan kayo malaman yan. Kasi public officer ako. Number 2, information about an individual who is performing a service under contract for a government institution. Ito po yung mga JO. So ano din po, hindi po protected ang mga JO kasi yung sweldo nyo po galing taxpayers' money. JO, contract of service, COS. Number 3, information relating to a discretionary benefit of a financial nature. Ito po yung SAP. No? So yung pag may nakatanggap kang pera mula sa gobyerno, part of your personal information is given away. It's not entirely free, no? Once you receive some assistance from government, then in order for transparency and accountability to put into play, you give up your right to be identified. Scholar ka, hindi mo pwedeng ipagsikreto 'yan. Kailangan malaman ng ating mga congressman, malaman ng mga taong bayan kung saan ba napupunta. Kung may tao ba talaga, buhay ba yung tao o patay. Number 4, personal information processed for journalistic, artistic, or literary purposes in order to uphold freedom of speech. So this is the protection of media workers. Nag-interview sila, in-interview ka, binigay mo naman pangalan mo, hindi mo naman sinabing off the record or whatever, at in-identify ka, hindi mo na siya pwedeng kasuhan for violation because this is upholding freedom of speech. You should have said na parang, I don't want to be identified. Then the burden is shifted back to the media worker. Number 5 po, personal information processed for research purposes intended for a public benefit. Datasets po tungkol po sa COVID rates para malaman po natin kung may movement ang COVID mula Cebu ba, bumalik ng Bicol, papuntang Manila, ganun. So, for research purpose po. Number 6, information necessary to carry out functions of public authority. Ito, BIR audits, COA audits. Information necessary for banks and financial institutions. They are covered po by Bank Secrecy Law and the Foreign Currency Deposit Act, FDCA, and Anti-Money Laundering Act. And personal information originally collected from residents of foreign jurisdictions in accordance with their data privacy law. So number 8 is just to comply with inter-country application of data privacy. Ibang bansa po kasi meron din silang data privacy law. So we have to respect that. So hindi sila sakop ng data privacy law. Sakop po sila ng sarili nilang bayan sa data privacy law. Okay, next. Balik po tayo sa PIC. Kung meron pong PIC sa inyo, administrator ng mga HEIs, ano po ang mga obligations ninyo? The PIC should collect personal information only for specified and legitimate purpose. Remember po, proportionality. Do not collect information that you will not need. Okay? Number 2, the PIC should process personal information fairly and lawfully. Kung mangongolekta ka kay Juan, edi yung mga ibang kapitbahay niya o kung iba, dapat hindi lang pwede sa isang tao kasi that's not being fair. Number 3, the PIC should retain personal information only for as long as necessary. For example, the collection of COVID slips which you sign should be disposed, I would think, after 30 days or at max after 1 year. You don't have to keep that information for the rest of your business kasi hindi na po reasonable yun. Number 4, the PIC should process accurate, relevant, and up-to-date personal information. So, hindi nyo pwedeng i-disclose yan basta-basta tapos yung pala, mali pala yung disclose yung information. Especially pag meron tayong data sharing agreements, yung sineshare ng hospital yung information sa DOH, dapat po siya, accurate po siya. Kasi minsan, nagkakamali pala yung hospital, nag-report sa DOH, yung DOH, ni-report niya yung total number of COVID cases, mali pala. So, number 5, the PIC should collect and process personal information adequately and not excessively. This is very similar to number 1. And the PIC must implement reasonable organizational, physical, technical security measures to protect personal data. Do not leave personal data lying around. No, kailangan secured ang servers natin, kailangan secured ang mga hard drives natin. Di pwede po yan ano po yung number 1 example po dyan na nag-violate dyan? Yung COMELEC po, noong 2016 po yata, yung mga information natin ng mga botante na hack po yan sa COMELEC website. Yun po, violation po yan ng number 6 obligation ng PIC. Okay, next slide. Pasensya na po napaka-text heavy ng slides. Okay, ito po yung framework ng data privacy, accountability, and compliance. Sa larangan po ng governance, dapat po mag-appoint kayo ng DPO. Ano po ang DPO? Asec, ano po yung DPO? Ang DPO ay ang Data Privacy Officer. Siya po yung tao na in charge sa organization, sa school, na make sure that the PIC protects the information it collects. Mag-conduct po kayo ng risk assessment, mag-organize kayo ng privacy management program, magkaroon kayo ng privacy manual katulad din po ng FOI manual, day-to-day actions, make sure po na may data security kayo, ano po yung protocol nyo pag may breach, ano po ang liability nyo or responsibility nyo sa mga third parties, HR nyo kailangan trained, then review, and then adapt po new technologies. So, yan po yung framework. I-screen cap nyo na lang po yan o hingin nyo na lang po yung, yung slides. Okay. Ano ba to? Yung slide na previously can be summarized into these instructions. Appoint your data protection officer. Conduct your privacy impact assessment. Parang audit po yan. Create your privacy manual. Implement your privacy and security measures and be ready in case of data breach. Example po, sa FOI, nagkaroon po kami ng data breach. Yung isang ID po ng isang nag-request, kasi nga di ba you're required to upload an FOI, your government ID, na-upload niya po yun as an attachment sa public site. So nababasa yun ng ibang tao. Hindi po yun napasa sa aming secured server, napunta siya sa public site. And your duty in case there's a data breach is to inform the data subject na, sir, ma'am, naging public po yung information na in-upload ninyo. We are telling you this in compliance with the Data Privacy Act. Tinawagan na po namin ang Google at sinabi namin sa Google, i-Google na yung i-take down. Tinawagan na rin po namin ang CICC at saka yung PNP cyber unit at nasabihan po namin sa kanila na nagkaroon po ng breach. So, ganun po yung protocol, more or less. Okay, next slide. Okay, don't worry, last 15 slides. Okay, what are the qualifications? So, yung PIC po at saka PIP, hindi po yan tao, unless kayo po yung sole proprietor. Yung DPO po yung tao. So, yung let's say, Mindanao State University is the PIC. And then mag-a-appoint siya ng chancellor o ng vice president na siya ang magiging data protection officer. What are the qualifications of a data protection officer? Dapat may knowledge po siya tungkol po sa mga responsibilities niya. Meron po siyang konting kaalaman sa privacy at data protection. Naintindihan po niya yung processing operations po ng kumpanya at may knowledge po siya tungkol sa internal structure at saka policies and process. So, yan po ang DPO. So, dapat po lahat ng mga SUCs at HEIs, no? Hindi lang po SUCs to, pati HEIs, mga private schools, you are mandated to have a data protection officer and yun. Full-time organic employee. For the public sector, kailangan career position. Pag private sector, regular, bawal po ang mga consultant. And if based on contract, dapat yung contract ay 2 years. Next slide. Meron po tayong tinatawag na mandatory registration pag ang employees mo ay 250 or you are processing more than 1,000 individuals or you pose a risk to the rights of and freedoms of data subjects. I will explain what number 3 is. And the processing is not occasional, meaning to say you do it on a day-to-day, regular basis, frontline. Okay, ito po yung number 3. Next slide. You are mandated to register if you are a government entity, you are a bank, you are a BPO, you are a university, college, or other institution of higher learning. Hospital po kayo or any other primary care facilities, diagnostic, therapeutic facilities, and other organizations processing genetic data. Number 7, you are an insurance company. Your business is involved in direct marketing, networking. Ito kasi yung nangyari kaya tayo nagka-Data Privacy Act is nangongolekta sila ng data tapos binebenta nila sa mga direct marketers. Tapos next thing you know, tinatawagan ka na kung gusto mo bang bumili ng lupa sa isang lugar o gusto mo mag-invest sa bagong business. Yan ang tinatawag na direct marketing kasi kinuha nilang information. Ngayon, hindi nila pwedeng gawin ito until they get your consent. Pharmaceutical companies and personal information processors processing personal information. Ito yung mga outsourcing agencies, manpower agencies. Okay, we are wrapping up. Ano po yung mga penalties? Next slide. Penalties, nako. Pag ang na-disclose nyo po ay personal information, 1 to 3 years. Pero ang na-disclose nyo po ay sensitive personal information, 3 to 6 years. May fine pa yan, 500,000 to 4 million pesos. So, tinan nyo po ano yung mga punishable acts: unauthorized processing, access due to negligence, improper disposal. Ito po, improper disposal. Di ko po alam kung nangyayari po sa mga eskwelahan ninyo. Pag kumuha, alam mo, you know, it's one thing to be concerned with the environment. It's another thing if you are disposing information, personal information of your students improperly. Yung gumagawa ka, yung nangongolekta tayo ng papel, di ba? And then yung papel, imbes na itapon natin, i-recycle natin. Yung kabilang side, yun yung gagawin nating notepad. Ang problema, kung yung pinotocopy, yung information na nakalagay doon ay yung biodata o yung PDS ng employee, tapos edi pad paper nga siya, pag tinuklap mo, makikita mo yan, edi in-expose mo na siya. So it's an improper disposal. So yung mga ganyan, hindi dapat ni-recycle to become pad paper. Talagang inaano siya, sineshred yan. So please be mindful of that. Madami na po akong nakitang sitwasyon na gano'n na the school was well-meaning. The government office was well-meaning. It wanted to recycle paper. But, you know, the recycled paper is actually a photocopy of something that has personal sensitive information and should not have been used as a pad paper at all. Next, intentional breach. Ganun din po, 1 to 3 years. Malicious disclosure, 18 months to 5 years. So yan po ang ano, pag dinisclose po yan sa Facebook. Pero these are punishable acts by the PIC po, yung kumpanya. Hindi po by a private individual. Unauthorized disclosure, 1 to 3 years up to 5 years and combination. So ang kulong po yan is between 1 year all the way up to 6 years and somewhere anywhere between 500 to 5 million na fine. Medyo maano po, mabigat. Okay, final slides. Harmonizing the Data Privacy Act and the right to information. Okay, ang right to information ay covered by EO number 2, series of 2016. Next slide. Yan, you're correct. Right of an individual to access information held by the government, information official record. So it's very broad. And the right to data privacy is very specific. It's the right of an individual to control the collection of his or her personal information about him. So it's personal information, sensitive personal information, and privileged information. HEIs, SUCs cannot use data privacy as an exemption for everything when there is FOI, okay? Data privacy can only be used when the information being involved is personal information. If it's about a contract, the data set, it's Board of Regents resolution, that falls under FOI. Okay, so yung exceptions, nasabi ko na nung 1 o'clock, yung special cases under right to privacy, nasabi ko na rin a while ago. Rule of thumb, upon getting an FOI request for a document which contains personal information, check whether the purpose stated by the requester is not contrary to law. Next, check whether the same may be disclosed under EO number 2, including the Data Privacy Act, other rules and regulations issued by the government agencies and regulators. Regulations, disclose what is only allowed. Yun nga. So for example, may requirement po ang pagiging chairman ng Commission on Elections. Hindi ka lang basta-basta pwede, hindi lang dapat 40 years old. Kailangan meron kang 10 years of practice at meron ka ding meron kang 10 years of practice and admitted to the bar. How else will you find that out unless you request for the personal data sheet of the applicant? So pwede mong i-disclose yung personal information yun kasi legitimate purpose siya and pwede mo naman i-redact yung ibang information na sensitive. No? Disclose what is only necessary. Remember the proportionality. Example, birth certificate. Ang birth certificate ba pumapasok yan sa FOI? Hindi. Kasi ang birth certificate, pumapasok po yan sa data subject request. Okay? Ang data subject request is information mo yan. Under Presidential Decree 603, Article 7, only these people can request for your birth certificate. The person himself or any person authorized by him. Yung asawa niya, magulang niya, anak niya, guardian niya. Yung korte or any proper public official whenever it's absolutely necessary. At pag namatay siya, the nearest next of kin. So, yan, ang isang carve-out po, birth certificate. Data subject po yan. So, pag nag-request po ng transcript of records, certificate of graduation, guys, hindi po yan FOI. Ano po yan? Data subject request. Frontline service po yan. Sakop po yan ng Anti-Red Tape Act at sakop po yan ng Anti-Red Tape Authority. Hindi po yan FOI. Ang FOI po ay kontrata sa paggawa ng bagong building para sa mga dorm. Ang FOI po ay pwedeng gamitin para makuha po ang resolutions ng Board of Regents. Datasets po kung ilan po ang taga Bangsamoro Autonomous Region na naka-enroll po sa eskwelahan. Yun po ang FOI. Pero yung paghingi po ng transcript of record, certificate of graduation, hindi po yan FOI. Data subject request po yan. Covered po yan ng frontline service ng HEI. Okay, ito na sabi ko na, accessing personal data sheet of government personnel. Pwede pong ma-disclose yung PDS pero hindi nyo dapat dinidisclose yung buong nakalagay sa PDS. Ang dinidisclose mo lang dun is yung relevant information. Tapos, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, pwede nyo naman pong i-redact yung mga sensitive personal information katulad po ng blood type, GSIS number, so on and so forth. In all cases, the rights of the data subject should be respected, including the right to be informed or notified about the processing of his or her personal information. Yun po. Ngayon, for example, pagdating po sa COVID at pumayag naman yung patient na, sige, sabihin niyo na po ang pangalan ko, that's consent. If you have the consent of the data subject, then that's fine to disclose. But you cannot just disclose their personal information by yourself. No, that will be violating the Data Privacy Act. Pag may consent ka, then that's good. I mean, that's okay. Okay, so if you guys have any questions or if you find my discussion on the Data Privacy Act inadequate, you can directly call them or reach them at Facebook at privacy.gov.ph or at privacyph and at privacy.gov.ph, National Privacy Commission. Hanapin nyo lang po ang aking kaibigan, si Chairman Raymond Liboro. Pati na rin po ang mga ibang commissioners dun, si Deputy Commissioner Aguirre at Deputy Commissioner Naga. Next slide. At huwag niyo pong kalimutan ng FOI dahil galing po akong FOI Philippines. Please like and subscribe our FOI pages on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Maraming salamat po. Back to you, Eden.
Thank you very much, Attorney Chris. Yes, I know our audience, especially from the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, have truly gained a lot of insights and information from your very organized and well-presented information. So again, thank you very much, Attorney Chris. So we will now go for our live question and answer portion. So we start with, we will start from the Facebook from Gerald Jason Balangaser, attorney. So some social media users, especially FB users, indicate their birthday and cell phone number as part of their profile information. If one uses those information for whatever purpose, would it be considered violation of the Data Privacy Act?
If you volunteer your information publicly and it is misused, then you have no one else to blame but yourself. So you should be careful on what information you are sharing on public. Bear in mind that if you share your full name, your address, your telephone number, and probably a government-issued ID, you are actually helping criminals steal your identity and probably run away by getting a loan, tapos hahabulin ka na lang ng bangko or getting a credit card and then hahabulin ka na lang ng police. So be mindful Okay, if you volunteer to put your, and you know that the information you are sharing is going to be public. So it's the caveat is on the data subject, Sir Gerald.
I see. Thank you so much, Attorney Chris. So really, as much as possible, we do not disclose our personal information publicly.
Yes,
Yes.
that's true, no? So as much as there is responsibility ng mga PIC, ng mga HEIs, ng mga SUCs, dapat tayo rin bilang mga data subjects, meron din tayong responsibility. May mga liabilities tayo.
Yeah, I agree, Attorney Chris. Thank you very much. So moving forward to our next question from Ms. Rosel Kahukom. So paano po kung ang nakalagay na purpose ay for future need or purpose? Legit po bang may tuturing?
No, that's too generic. Rosel, do not accept that as a legitimate purpose yung for future need. It has to be more specific sa ba nila gagamitin. No? For example, yung pangolekta ng mga restaurants for contact tracing, nakalagay, the purpose is for contact tracing and submission to the IATF Department of Health. Ganon. Hindi pwedeng for future need. Paano kung yung future need is ibebenta niya sa direct marketer? O di nabenta na yung telephone number mo, binentahan ka na ng lupa ng di oras.
Yeah, that's right. So we have to be very careful, ma'am. Thank you, Attorney. So next, let's have another question from Ms. Jennifer Garcia. So what if the institution itself sends out contact information of their faculty to students without seeking permission? Seeking permission, is it legal?
Okay. What is legal is the official email. So the institution can send to students the official email and the official telephone number, office telephone number of the faculty. That is allowed. That is considered a special case. But the institution cannot, without the consent of the faculty, send to students their personal telephone number and their personal address. Kasi it may lead to stalking and harassment. So pag personal mobile, personal email, kailangan may consent. Pag walang consent, violation yan ng institution. Ang pwede lang i-disclose ng institution ay ang official. So for example, Mindanao State University, teacher ka, Eden. So it's Eden at msu.edu.ph. Yun pwede mong i-share. Pero hindi pwedeng i-share yung parang eden85@yahoo.com email mo. That cannot be shared. They will be held liable.
Wow, that's very good information, Attorney Chris. Yeah, so we have to take note on that, especially for the faculty members in higher institutions and even in different departments. Okay, Attorney, let's have another one.
Sure.
This is from Mr. Punay. So question lang po, during online class, is it okay to take pictures then post it in our personal FB account? I think this is very relevant question, Attorney.
Right. So you have to see if the professor, that's why for teachers out there, you now have to verbally declare when you share your intellectual property, your slides, whether you are okay to share it. I mean, for example, yung slides na shinare namin, I publicly said na we will send you copies, we have no problem. But a teacher, ano niya yun eh, dugot pawis niya yan eh, yung paggawa niya ng mga slides, lalo-lalo na kung mga datasets niya. At pag sinabi niya na, okay, these slides are mine, do not share it, then do not screen cap it and share it kasi pwede kanyang kasuhan. Pero pag wala siyang sinabi, you can assume that the online class or the slides being shown is for sharing and it falls under fair use. So magpaalam and then pag sinabi talaga ng teacher na, oh guys, itong slides ko, ano yan, intellectual property ko, please do not share it. you have been warned. At pag shinare nyo at nakita niya na matrack niya na shinare nyo, pwede kanyang makasuhan under the Data Privacy Act saka sa Intellectual Property Code. So paalam.
So consent is really needed and necessary in this case. But what if attorney yung nasa Zoom meeting kayo or nasa Google Meet, and then example, one teacher wants to post his or her class online, yung mga pictures ng students niya as well as himself or herself. Is that okay po?
Pag nag-screen cap siya ng meeting and then kailangan kumuha ng consent. There is protection sa Data Privacy Act. The student can actually demand from whoever took that picture and published it online, demand that it be taken down. So may karapatan. So if it's a public class, then you can screen cap it and then post it. But then if a person sees himself there, can demand from the one who posted it to put it down. That's protected by the Data Privacy Act. So that's the protocol there, Eden. Again, to be on the safe side, it's always better for the one taking a screen cap to ask permission that, oh, I will take a screen cap. And then pag may nagsabi na I don't want to be part of it, at least pwede niyang i-off yung photo, yung video, at least pangalan niya nakalagay doon, then that's fine. Pero pag nagsabi na I'll take a screen cap, it's already implied, it's implied na agreement or consent na pwede mong i-share. Oo. Kasi nangyayari yan eh. For example, nasa restaurant ka, tapos kumakain ka and then may nagpicture doon, nakasama ka sa picture, may karapatan ka na dapat hindi ka kasama doon. The same applies in online classes. So may karapatan yung tao na pasok sa camera, sa picture na ibaba mo yan kasi andun ako, tanggalin mo yan. You blur me out, you take out my eyes, redact it. I don't want to be shown in that picture. That is one of the rights of a data subject.
I see. So we really have to consider on that. Yes. So not only for teachers but everyone really must consider on that idea po.
Yes.
Okay. So in the interest of time, let's have one more question, Attorney Chris. Is that okay po?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So again, this is from Ma'am Rosel. She's very participative po. So this is her question. Is posting certificate against the Privacy Act, since certificates also contains full names and signature of others and are supposedly only for those who comply to the requirements to get a certificate? Yeah, especially maraming webinars, maraming mga online training. So any thoughts on this, attorney?
Okay, so certificates are allowed to be posted when a person as an official of an HEI or SUC signs a certificate. He more or less gives away consent at that portion wherein his full name is shown and his signature is shown. It is a certification that the individual achieved kung ano man yung nagawa na-aralan niya dun sa certificate. So that's fine. Posting of certificate, gusto niyang mag-humble brag, gusto niyang i-show na natapos ko tong online course, that's fine. Yeah. The public official, in a way, allowed a portion of his personal property given away. So it comes with the risk of being a public officer and an official.
I see. Thank you very much for that answer, Attorney Chris. So any last message and parting words to our viewers, sir?
I'd like to thank you, Eden, for being a gracious host and moderator this afternoon. Please extend my thanks to Dr. Director Nels Alibin of CHED-HECBOL Project. Thank you to all of those who stayed in for the past 2 hours listening to me babble about freedom of information and data privacy. I am not an expert in data privacy. If you really want an in-depth discussion, please reach out to the National Privacy Commission. In terms of access to information or FOI, We are here to serve you. Please send us a message on our Facebook Messenger FOI Philippines. And please, I encourage you to exercise your constitutional right to access information. Please log on our website, foi.gov.ph, and learn more about your government by asking. Daghang salamat po. Diyos unay Tiagdina. Maraming salamat po, Eden, Director Nels, and everyone on this 14th webinar. Mabuhay po kayo lahat.
Thank you very much again, Attorney Ablan from PCOO. So in this webinar, we were able to know the following. So this is the synthesis of our 14th webinar. So we discussed about freedom of information, specifically on matters on transparency, about fighting fake news, academic research, innovation, and empowerment. And of course, we have to take note that for government agencies, we have 15 days grace period for getting information and accessing those vital information. In matters of Data Privacy Act, we were able to know about the right to privacy, the information privacy, and of course, personal information. We try to distinguish versus sensitive personal information. And lastly, we also have the privileged information. So data privacy is more on the private individuals and private institutions, while FOI is more on the government institutions. So there you have it. In behalf of the Commission on Higher Education, headed by Director Nelia A. Alibin, and of course, the team, Sir Jean, Marian, and FF, we would like to thank you for attending our 14th webinar. Thank you also for viewing us live here in Facebook and in YouTube channel. Thank you for the PCOO office headed by Attorney Chris Ablan, and of course, Ms. Pearl. Thank you for your assistance. And feedback form of this webinar will be given an hour to those who have pre-registered. So you are given until August 31, Monday, that's Monday, to evaluate to get your certificates. So again, in behalf of CHED-HECBOL Project, we would like to thank you for viewing us live here. And we educate as one. We have CHED-HECBOL online. Good afternoon, everyone.